Hi, this is Greg Herder, and I'd like to welcome you to my monthly coaching webinar. My goal in doing these webinars is to help you keep on track at using the information and ideas you learned at one of my live 3-day seminars. I also want to share with you new ideas and encourage you to grow both personally and professionally. Today, I also want to welcome the managers who are taking part in my Mega Managing webinar series. They are in the middle of a series of 8 webinars on leadership, recruiting, and building a culture of success. The reason I invited them to join this group today is twofold. First is because we're going to be talking about some of the books that they have been asked to read as part of their training program. And because when I set up the schedule for the Mega Managing webinars, I forgot to check my schedule for my monthly coaching webinars, so I booked 2 at the same time. And so far I haven't yet figured out how to do 2 webinars at once. I do apologize for any inconvenience this may have caused any of you. The information I want to cover today can be truly life-changing. Now, I always struggle in how to describe this information. What we're going to talk about today falls under the topic called philosophy. But as soon as I mention the word philosophy, most of you start tuning out. My mentor, Jim Rohn, was big on understanding philosophy. When we met, and I was struggling to figure out my life, he really got me to think about things differently. 2 of Jim's favorite questions that he asked me over and over again was, Greg, who sold you on that philosophy? Or, Greg, why did you buy that philosophy? Who did you buy that philosophy from? He taught me that if we want to change the way our life is going, the place to start is by changing your philosophy. He helped me see that whether you become rich or poor was not determined by how much you made. It was determined by your philosophy towards money. So let me share with you 2 different philosophies. One philosophy is to save 30% of what you make and live on the rest. The other philosophy is to spend your money and see if you have anything left over at the end of the month and save it. Now, these are 2 different philosophies, but they produce 2 very different results. One will make you rich, powerful, influential. The other will leave you cold, stone broke, always stressed about money. Here's the real amazing thing. It does not matter how much money you earn. It's the philosophy that makes the difference in how things end up. It's not the amount you earn. And that's why so many people who have earned a lot of money over their lives end up broke. They bought into the wrong philosophy. The real sad part is that for most people who want to do better and really improve the quality of their life, they focus on earning more money, not thinking about their philosophy. This is the very thing that I want to talk to you about today. It's a concept called self-deception. The problem is that when we're suffering from self-deception, we are blind to the fact that we are actually creating the problems that we say we are trying to solve. We get caught in a trap that is created by our own self-deception, our lack of awareness, our lack of insight. This is a problem of huge size. And it's the cause of a huge amount of communication problems between husbands and wives, parents and children, bosses and employees, co-workers, countries, and groups of all types. I know for me personally, becoming aware of and working on solving the issue of my own self-deception has been a very powerful source of personal growth and development. The first book that I read that really started me down this path of understanding self-deception was this wonderful book called Leadership and Self-Deception. The book deals with the problem of self-deception at the workplace and how so many problems in our workplaces are created because both leaders and workers don't understand it. And it undermines our effectiveness, our profitability. I also read the book called The Anatomy of Peace, which deals with the same challenges, only applies it directly to families, relationships. Now, both of these books are truly eye-opening and very powerful, and I highly recommend that you read one or both of these. If you're more interested in applying what we're going to talk about today to business applications, then read Leadership and Self-Deception. If you want to apply this to your family life, your personal relationships, then read The Anatomy of Peace. Now, either of them will have great application in both places. They're just using examples from either the workplace or from a home life, so the starting point is up to you. When I first started to think about this issue, it made sense to me intellectually, but at times I struggled to actually live it. And then I read this wonderful book called Nonviolent Communication. And I read it immediately after I read Leadership and Self-Deception for the third or fourth time. And somehow, when I read these two books right after each other, the light bulb went on in my brain. And so much of it more came together, and I was able to use it much more effectively in my mind. Over the years, I have found that the people who read Nonviolent Communication and either Leadership and Self-Deception or The Anatomy of Peace, one after another, get much greater results than if they read either one by themselves. And I encourage you to start with either Leadership and Self-Deception or The Anatomy of Peace, and then instantly follow it up with Nonviolent Communication. I promise it will help you apply the concepts and get a bigger picture. Leadership and Self-Deception will give you a great framework to think about this concept of self-deception. Nonviolent communication will actually help you live it on a very practical basis. It gives you specific things to do. Now, my goal in this webinar is really to sell you on reading these books. So I'm going to attempt to give you the basic concepts and encourage you to consider adopting and merging these philosophies into your daily life. You'll find that the benefits you get from doing this will be very powerful. So let's first deal with the concept of self-deception. In Leadership and Self-Deception, they tell you the story of Dr. Ignaz Semmelweis. He was the doctor that was trying to figure out why mortality rates in his section of the Vienna General Hospital back in the 1800s was so much higher than the other section. Now, he was in charge of these two sections, and one of them had a very high mortality rate. So he was trying to figure this out. First, he started by standardizing everything that he could do. So he wanted both sections to run identical. And he thought, gosh, we're using the same treatment, the same birthing positions. And everything was identical in every way. The bedding, everything. But in his section, the death rate was 1 in 10 mothers that came in to give birth. In the other section, they had a 1 in 50 death rate. Now, this drove him crazy. He looked at everything and worked very hard to make these identical. Now, the only difference he could find was that the section that he was in was staffed by physicians, people that had actually become full-time doctors. The other section was staffed by midwives. Now, for the life of him, he could not figure out why this would make a difference. In fact, he thought the doctor should be able to provide better care. Now, this was back in the mid-1800s, before we really understood germs. After trying everything you could think of, looking at everything, he actually started looking at the behavior of himself and the other doctors. And he realized that he and the other doctors usually came into the hospital in the morning and did research, trying to figure out a variety of different things, and they did their research on cadavers. Then, after they had done their research, they went and met with patients, gave birth. he eventually guessed correctly that they might be transferring particles from the cadavers that were diseased to their patients. So he instituted a very simple procedure. He had all the research doctors wash their hands with a chlorine and lime solution before they left the morgue and their research stations. And within a matter of months, the mortality rate in his section dropped to 1 in 100. Dramatically better. And it was because he was not aware of the problem. Now, after he made this realization, he realized that he and the other doctors had actually been responsible for killing hundreds of new mothers and their babies because they were simply not aware of the problem. This is the problem with self-deception. Self-deception blinds us to the true causes of the problems that we are working so hard to try and solve. To the extent that we are self-deceived, our communication is undermined at every turn. Also, notice in the story that Semmelweis tried to make both sections of the hospital identical. By all accounts, both sections were doing the same thing, but getting very different results. After 30 years of working with salespeople, I see this over and over again. One salesperson tries to copy what another salesperson does. Now, their marketing may even look identical. What they're saying to people seems to be identical. Their closing techniques, everything, and yet one gets unbelievably good results, and the other gets very disappointing results. Leadership and self-deceptions calls this your way of being in the world. I like to think of it as a person's philosophy towards others, how they see the people they're working with. In leadership and self-deception, they say the difference is whether or not you see people or as objects. Now, I will have to tell you, I could not agree more. If you look at sales as purely a job that you have to do to pay the bills, hit your goals, over the long run, you will find that nothing will truly make a big difference for you. No matter how something works for somebody else, it will not produce the same results for you. Because the people you are trying to sell can feel that you're just a number to them. They can sense that you don't see them as a person who is just as important and just as valuable as you are. So that you really understand how critical this is. The starting point to effective sales, leadership, and communication of all types is to actually care for the person you are talking to. I had the good fortune of meeting Gary Keller, the founder of Keller Williams, back in 1986. It was the year we started Hobbs Herder Advertising, and he was managing a single office in Austin, Texas at the time. Now, I instantly knew that he was different than 99% of the other brokers. I could sense that he cared about his people, his agents. Now, I called him up, said I'd like to come in and talk to his agents, give them a little educational program, and at the end, sell them on coming to one of my seminars on marketing. I told him I was trying to share some of the cutting-edge marketing ideas of the time. Now, I could sense that he truly cared about his people, and he agreed to bring me in and let me train some of his people and sell them on coming to one of my seminars. Now, I was scheduled to speak at his office meeting. And in the end, my goal was to sell his agents on buying tickets to a seminar. Now, and I explained this to Gary. Now, later on, I found out that he actually had screened me, called some of the other people that I had sold tickets to, made sure that he felt like, gosh, this was going to be something my agents are going to get great value from. But now, I met with Gary the morning of this presentation, and he asked me something that no other broker had ever asked me. As we sat down and talked, I told him a little bit about what I was doing, and he said, Greg, just tell me, how can I help you accomplish your goals today? I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, Greg, I'm sure you have some goals. You have an objective. How can I help you accomplish that? And I genuinely felt like he cared about my success just as much as he cared about his office's success, his agent's success. Now, when he asked me this, and I could sense that he genuinely cared about my success that day, I was a little stunned. I did not know exactly what to say. Fortunately for me, Gary was willing to actually draw it out of me. He asked me if I had a goal for the meeting. I didn't really want to admit this, but eventually he got me to admit, yes, my goal is to get at least 30% of your agents to sign up on attending my 3-day seminar. He said, great, how can I help you accomplish that goal? Now, I had never been asked this by a broker. Now, I'd not been doing it all that long at the time, so I stumbled a little bit, and I said, well, I don't know. He said, can I share some things that have worked for me in similar situations? I said, well, that would be great. He said, at the end of your presentation, I would like you to turn to me and ask if I think this is something my agents should attend. And he said, Greg, I will tell them that I've talked to a couple of people that recently attended your seminar. Tell them that I really think they should go. But not only that, I found that if I'm the first person there to say, gosh, I'm going to go to the seminar, why don't you sign up with me and we'll go together? He said, I know I can influence some people to go. He said, would that be okay with you? Now, I almost fell over. He said, Greg, together we can have a huge impact. We can get my agents really moving down this marketing path. Now, Gary had a strong belief in agents' personal marketing. His goal was to help agents build their brand, their success. And I want you to know, I was a little shocked and stunned because he was willing to help me. Now, years later, I had actually become friends with Gary. And I asked him one time, Gary, why were you so helpful that first time I spoke in your office? And I will never forget his answer. He said, Greg, I care about the success of every agent, every buyer, every seller, every vendor, every person that works here. I know that the more people I help succeed, the more successful I will be. And I believe that Gary's success has been driven by the fact that he cares. Now, since then, I will tell you, I've spoken for a lot of other Keller Williams offices. But I've never had another Keller Williams office ask me and support me the way Gary did. And I am sure that that's why Gary generated such incredible results. See, the loyalty from the people that he managed, the care, the value they gave to him was in direct proportion to the fact that he cared about them. Now, my mentor, Jim Rohn, always said, Greg, if you are willing to help enough people get what they want, you will get everything on the planet that you want. And I want to tell you, I believe that's true. And this starts by genuinely seeing that every person you meet is a person whose needs, hopes, dreams are just as important, just as valuable as yours. They are not an object to sell or manipulate. And this is what these books truly address. And they address it in a way that makes you understand the impact that our philosophy about how we perceive people around us has a huge impact on the results we generate. Before I read these books, I knew I thought I was a caring person who thought about others. But what I realized is that there were many times that I did not treat others like their hopes and dreams, their needs, were just as important to them as mine are or were to me. and that I often treated people like objects. To illustrate, let me tell you a story. Years ago, I was flying on an airplane from Phoenix to Orange County. I had an early number, so I was able to board early, and this was on a Southwest flight, so you get a boarding number and you get to go on. Now, I took an aisle seat where somebody was seated in the window. Now, I knew the flight was going to be pretty close to being totally full, but not totally full. I knew there was going to be a few seats open. And I'd had a tough day, and I thought, gosh, I'd love to have an empty seat next to me. So I sat down in the aisle seat and thought, gosh, I really want to enjoy this flight home. So I set my briefcase in the middle seat. Then I pulled out a newspaper, and I was acting like I was reading it. I opened it up so it took up a lot of space, sort of put it, so it was blocking people as they were looking down. And as people walked down the aisle, looking for a chair, I avoided making eye contact with them. And I tried to make it look like the seat might already be occupied, or gosh, there's not going to be a lot of room. I tried to make it as unappealing as I possibly could. Now, I'm going to think about this for a second. Have you ever done anything like this? Now, when I was doing that, let me ask you, was I seeing the people looking for a chair as people whose needs, wants were just as important as mine, who had had just as long a tough day as I did, who would like to be able to relax, enjoy some space just as much as me? Or was I seeing those people as objects? People that I could try and manipulate into not sitting next to me? Now, let me ask you the most important question on this webinar. Do you think the people walking by looking for a chair could sort of sense that I saw them as objects? Now, this is a critical question, so I just want to get your response here, and I think we can put this up here right next to the screen here. Just, do you think people could sense I saw them as objects? I'm just going to put a yes or no. So just give me a yes or no here. Do you think they could sense that I didn't want them to sit there, that they weren't really important to me? Just give me a yes or no. All right, I would really love your response here. So I'll put that up there. All right, I see the vast majority of you sort of do feel like, gosh, they could sense that I didn't want them to sit there. And I will tell you, I believe they could sense that as well. Which brings me to one of the most important insights that you'll get out of these books. You can do any outward activity, whether it's communicating, sharing information with people, teaching them. You can do anything. And while you're doing it, you can see somebody as a person, or you can see them as an object. Now, the actions you're taking, the words you're saying, the physical motions can be done from either point of view. What I have found is that the difference in results that you generate between what perspective you have, though, is huge. If people sense that you care about them, if they sense that you value them, that you're giving them your undivided total attention, it has a huge impact. On the other hand, you can do the exact same thing, use the same clothes, the same words. But if people sense that, gosh, these are just words, it's a manipulation, you don't really care, let me tell you, it's not going to have the same impact. Once I really saw and understood this, to me it explained why two agents can seemingly do the same thing, execute the same marketing program, use the same closes, go after the same clients, and yet see dramatically different results. It also explains why communication between spouses, parents, children often fail when you even use the words that maybe your marriage counselor told you to use. When your spouse or kids or clients or anyone you are interacting with senses that they are just an object to you, that you're trying to manipulate them or manage them. If they don't sense that you care, it will not be effective. Think about it this way. Maybe you've had a disagreement with your spouse. And, you woke up in the morning, got into a little spat about something, and it sort of got out of proportion. And now your spouse accuses you of really not caring. Now, you really don't, you're frustrated, and eventually your spouse wears you down, you're looking at your watch, you feel pressure to go, and you just want it to be over. And so suddenly you just look over and say, well, I'm sorry. Let's just drop it. And your spouse now responds negatively. Your spouse looks at you and says, no, you don't mean it. See, they can sense that you don't mean it. You can say, gosh, I'm sorry, but because they sense that they were being managed, they actually resist you even more. And now we get caught in this loop. And this is what self-deception does to us. It puts us in a place where we get stuck in our communication. Now, when most people start to understand this concept, they tell me, gosh, Greg, it really makes me want to treat people better. I vow that I'm going to look at everybody I come in contact with as a person. The problem is that when we are caught up in this cycle of thinking, seeing people as objects, we do it because we are suffering from self-deception, and we are unaware that we're even doing it. Now, in the books, Leadership and Self-Deception and The Anatomy of Peace, they call this being in the box. Self-deception is likened to being in a box because it seems that you're shut in a box with no external stimulus coming in except for your own closed perspective. For instance, you may think you're totally committed and engaged in a project. You're giving it your all, forsaking holidays, personal occasions for work. And yet, if you talk to other people, from an outside perspective, they would say, well, no, they really aren't committed. And since you can't or don't see it from an outside perspective, you're only seeing it from your internal point of view, your own justification, it actually makes you defensive, and you often come to believe that the people who are actually trying to help you are working against you, sabotaging your success. Now, the most basic test in determining whether or not you are in the box or out of the box, whether you're seeing people or as object, is to think about whether you make the effort to learn the names of the people you're interacting with. Now, if you're not even interested enough in learning someone's name, something as simple and basic of who they are, you're probably seeing them as objects. And so you're really in the box. You don't regard them as people, only as objects. You decide that their needs aren't as important as yours. And in the end, you put your needs, your goals, your hopes and dreams above everybody else's. Everybody else comes in second. Being out of the box means that you place your needs, as well as the needs of others, on the same level. You are all equal. If it's as simple as people treating others as people, including all the hard work and training that goes with a job, the motivation for smart people to be smarter and for skilled people to develop even more skills is for them to be treated in a straightforward manner and give them the respect and dignity that they deserve. And this is why when people feel like, gosh, I'm treating you like a person, now they feel like you're getting a straightforward response, things go so much better. You can give feedback, critiques, help, and get positive response. Unfortunately, when we become self-deceived, we close ourselves off from communication and feedback, or we become defensive. And now we get into that box, and we get into this box through what is called a simple act of self-betrayal, which is simply an act contrary to what we feel we should actually do for another. Oftentimes in our lives, there are certain things that we feel like, gosh, I should do for somebody. I should send them a note. I should help them do this. But oftentimes, we don't. I can think back when I was married and we had a baby in the house. And I just started a new company. Janet was working full time, but we were busy and stressed. But Janet was nursing, and I remember Scott yelling at night, crying. And a number of times I can remember I should get up and go and help him. Now, sometimes I did, but sometimes I also would sit there and think, gosh, I wish Janet would go get him. Now, Janet seemed to be sleeping next to me, and I think, well, gosh, if I move, she'll know I'm awake. And I really didn't want to get up out of bed. And when I knew and I sensed that I should have done something, I should have done something, and I ignored that feeling. Here's the funny thing. As soon as I do that, I start to justify my behavior. I said, well, I've had a tough day. I'm doing this, and, it's not nearly as hard on Janet. And now I start justifying this. Often, this comes when we simply do less than we could, less than we are capable of. Jim Rohn always said, Greg, the most destructive thing that people can do is settle for less than they're capable of. He says it's doing less than they can. He said because now it undermines our own self-confidence, our own self-worth. He said if we always give our best, if we do everything we possibly can, give 100% effort, we always feel good about ourselves. It doesn't matter what the outcome was. He said, but if we do less than we could, now we're going to try and justify it, especially if it fails. And I see this over and over again. If we do less than we know we are capable of in treating our spouse, our kids, in helping out a client, in helping out a coworker, it undermines our very respect for ourselves. We know we should do this. But as soon as we do, as soon as we fail to meet our own justification, our own value in our mind, what happens is we start looking for justifications for why we didn't. We place blame on things and people around us that in our mind justifies our lack of effort or our mistreatment of others. Well, gosh, my kids did this and this and this. That's why I yelled at them. That's why I did that. Yeah, I may have been a little strong, but, they deserved it. When we do this, our view of reality becomes distorted. And we look more for justification that we are right and that everyone else is wrong, and how everybody around us, how all these things out there are taking advantage of us. This also makes us much less open to feedback from others. And in the process, we actually invite mistreatment from the people we care about. This is called collusion. And it gives other people reasons to see us as problems. And now we see them as a problem. We get into this vicious cycle. With this perverted view of the situation, it creates a perverted response from the other party. And now it goes around and around and around, and we never get out of this. To better understand this concept of collusion, think about it this way. Have you ever been in a situation at work where someone who reports to you is underperforming? Being the boss, you say, gosh, I need to sit down and talk with him or her. But when you sit down and talk with them, instead of perceiving your desire to help them, they perceive it that you distrust them, or you're lording over them because you have authority or position. And in the end, they simply disregard your advice and continue to do the same things they've done. Now, what happens then is that you now see their underperformance and say, well, I told them what to do and they're still not doing it. They're underperforming. And now you put a little bit more, pressure on them. You talk to them a little bit sterner. And now they feel even more persecuted, more unfairly judged. And now this cycle goes on and on. Because now their performance doesn't improve, you bear down harder, they feel more resentful, you feel angrier, and again, this just keeps going and going. But both of you, because you're caught up in your perception, you can't take a step outside and see the other person's point of view. This is that trap of self-deception. Eventually, one of you just give up. And you either fire them or they leave to find a boss that will give them a better work environment. Remember that the reason why you got in the box in the first place is that because you betrayed yourself. In that moment of personal betrayal, you have formed a stylized version of yourself that does not mesh with the perception of the people outside your box. And this is important to really get, because what you perceive and what other people are perceiving are very different. So if you are in the box towards somebody and you try any of the activities that we would think would help, it often meets with tremendous resistance. And this is why now we get even more upset, because we say, well, I tried all these things. Because remember early on I said you can do any activity seeing people as people or seeing them as objects. If your boss comes to you and treats you like an object, he can say all the right things, he can ask all the right questions, but you sense he's trying to just manage you. And it will probably fail. That's why when you're leading somebody, if you see them as objects and you try and change them, change their behavior, give them feedback, it just doesn't work. On the other hand, you can give them the exact same advice, but if they sense that you care about them, that you see them as a person, you will get very different results. Also, if you just try and cope with people, they can sense that you're just trying to cope with them. So if you apologize to your spouse because you're trying to, let this drop, you're trying to cope with it, they sense it, and now it just even makes it worse. And you can try and communicate and say all the right things, say the things that you've read in the books, and guess what? They can sense that it's just words. Also, you can try changing your behavior. You can say, well, don't do that. But now they sense your underlying sort of judgment or the fact that you really don't care. So the question that people always say, well, Greg, I can see how this can be very destructive, but how do I get out of the box? Now, the way out of the box is always the same. The way out of the box is to simply see people as people, everyone we meet. And the more consistent we can get in doing this, the easier it is to stay outside of the box. When we see people as people, we stop resisting them. We stop blaming them. We stop looking for ways to justify our own actions. The moment you start to feel that you want to be out of the box towards someone, the funny thing is you're already out of the box because you're actually seeing them as a person. You realize that their needs, values, personhood is just as important, just as valuable as yours. The problem is that when we are in the box, we normally don't step back and ask, gosh, am I looking at this person as an object or as a person? And this is where I found this wonderful book called Nonviolent Communication. Helped me to apply the lessons of leadership and self-deception. Now, leadership and self-deception, the anatomy of peace, both have a variety of ways of helping you get out of the box. But I found that I struggled with some of them until I read these two books together. Now, Nonviolent Communication, or NVC for short, is a language of life. And it helps us transform our old patterns of defensiveness, aggressiveness, into what I call a compassionate communication module or mode. And I found it will dramatically improve the quality of all your relationships if you study and practice nonviolent communication. It'll give you a foundation for improving all your relationships, especially the communication you have with significant others and in yourself in every moment. It also helps us remain focused on what's happening in this moment. Most of us are always living in the future, in the past. NVC keeps us focused on what's happening now. And this is so important. Also, nonviolent communications helps us realize how important connection to ourselves, to our significant others, to our clients, to everyone is in our lives. In fact, having the intention to connect with others, just the intention. This is, gosh, I want to connect with each person that I come in contact with. And an intention to connect with ourselves is one of the most important goals and most powerful outcomes in practicing nonviolent communication and in getting outside of being self-deceived. We live our lives moment to moment. Yet most of the time we're on autopilot. We're reacting out of habit rather than awareness of what's really going on. By creating a space for our attention and thinking about it moment by moment, nonviolent communication helps us create a pathway and a practice for our lives that is actually doable. And I have found that some of the fundamental elements of nonviolent communication help us keep seeing people as people. So let me give you the basic model for nonviolent communication. It's very straightforward and simple. It's a process that starts with two foundational assumptions and then gives you four components that sort of guide you to what I call a next action step. Now, the basics of nonviolent communication ideas start with the foundational assumption that you must always start by giving empathy to others. Receiving from the heart creates a means to connect with others and share experiences in a truly life-enriching way. Empathy goes far beyond compassion. It allows us to put ourselves in the other's shoes, to sense the same feelings and understand the same needs. In essence, being open and available to what's alive in others, so that we actually sense and care about them as a person. Also, when we are able to give empathetically to another, it allows us to remain present and aware of our own needs and the needs of the other person, even in extreme situations that are often very difficult to handle. This is why this is so powerful. And I found it's incredibly useful. Then, the second intention is that you must always act from honesty. Giving from the heart has its root in honesty. Honesty begins with truly understanding our own needs, ourselves, and being in tune with what's alive in us, what's going on within us at the present moment. And the more we are able to stay attuned to that, now we can respond honestly, and we can learn to give ourselves empathy when we need it, and we can break down all the barriers to communication that keep us from connecting with others. We stop blaming, we stop doing so many of the things that now lead us into the box or stop us from really understanding what's going on in our own body. Now, there are 4 basic components or steps to nonviolent communication. First of all, good communication starts when you learn to give observation without evaluation. Observation without evaluation consists of noticing concrete things and actions around us. When we learn to distinguish between judgment and what we sense in the present moment, and simply observe observable facts, this makes a huge difference. When we make others feel judged, communication at all levels starts to fall apart. Now, I found this is very practical to understand. Think about something like giving a performance review, giving feedback to your kids, your spouse. Now, the goal of a performance review is to help somebody grow. But if you write a performance review and say you're late all the time, that comes across as a judgment, a put down. On the other hand, if you just simply observe and write down in the last 90 days, I noticed that you came into work on time 36 times. You were 20 minutes late X number of times. Now you just write down, here's the observable facts. Don't put any judgment. And now you simply ask, now, I notice these are the times you came into work. Can you explain what's going on? And you give people an open way of communicating without, at the very beginning, them feeling like you're judging them. You'll find that your communication goes so much better. You'll understand what's going on, and you'll be able to help them solve those problems so much more effectively. Now, this is hard to do because so oftentimes we judge so quickly. Next, you got to learn to notice what you are feeling. When we notice things around us, we invariably experience varying emotions, physical sensations in that particular moment. Here, distinguishing feelings from thoughts is an essential step in the nonviolent communication process. We've also got to learn to communicate what's alive in others, what they're feeling. Now, if we're able to get in touch with our feelings and just be aware of them, gosh, I notice I'm angry. Once we are aware of our anger, it allows us to step out and look at ourselves objectively, and now we can give ourselves a much better way of deciding, what is that? What's driving that? And once we are in touch with our emotion, what we need to ask ourselves is, what is the need I am trying to meet? And there's always a need that drives that feeling. Now, all individuals have needs. Now, most of the time, trying to fill those needs is what sustains and enriches our lives, especially when those needs are positive and they meet. And when we experience positive needs, when we fulfill them, We experience comfortable feelings like happiness, peacefulness. Now, when we experience a lack of needs, frustration, anger, we feel are driven because we're not meeting those needs effectively. Understanding that we, as well as everyone around us, also have the same needs. And we all are people. This is perhaps the most important step in really understanding nonviolent communication. It's that we need to live empathically with everybody because we all have the same needs. We're all trying to satisfy those needs in the best way we can. Everyone is equal. Now, what we have to do is learn how to look for ways to get everyone's needs met, not just our own. If we just focus on our own needs, again, communication breaks down, we get into trouble. But now, if we are aware of the other person's needs, and what I found is, if you can clearly articulate what the other person's needs are to them, and say, if I understand you correctly, here's your need in this situation, with your spouse, your kids, and maybe it's a need for autonomy, whatever it is. And now you share, gosh, I understand, wonderful daughter, you have a need for autonomy, to feel like I'm trusting you. Let me share with you my need. I have a need for your safety, to feel like I'm protecting you. And now you say, how can we get both of our needs met? You'll be surprised at how far you can now reach agreement. Your kids will come up with absolutely brilliant ideas if they really understand your needs. Not coming from anger, but gosh, if you really understand theirs. In fact, Marshall Rosenberg, the founder of nonviolent communication, said in any conflict, if both parties in any conflict, no matter how severe, how long it's been going on, if both parties can explain the needs of everyone involved, as soon as both parties understand what the needs of everyone involved in, then you will resolve that conflict within 20 minutes or less. Now that seems like an amazing claim, but yet I've seen this over and over again. Things that seem like, gosh, this is, unbelievable, irresolvable. If I reach out and I try and understand the other person's need, what is your need in this situation? Once I've helped them get clear of their need, and then I get clear on my need and I communicate that, we can find a resolution to almost any problem. The last step in nonviolent communication is making sure that when you are coming to a conclusion of your communication, you make a clear present request that states exactly what you want. Now, a couple of things. Most of us aren't clear on what we really do want. And if we aren't clear on it, gosh, how can the other person do it? We say our spouse, you aren't there for me. And our spouse looks at us and says, well, gosh, what do you want me to do? And we say, well, yeah, I don't know. I want you to meet my needs. Well, what are your needs? How can I help? And what we find is that oftentimes we ask people to make unbelievably unrealistic things. We want them to sort of read our mind and do it in advance before we even know it. And that's impossible. I've also found that one of the tenets of nonviolent communication is that you rarely get things when you ask for them in the negative, because people don't know how to translate that into specific action. So don't ever ask for anything in the negative. I don't want you to do this. I don't want you to do that. If you don't tell them what you do want, they don't have any other alternative. And it makes us think about what we really want. So always make a clear present request of exactly what you want from this outcome. When we learn how to make a clear present request in concrete action that can be carried out in the present moment, we will begin to find ways to cooperate and work with people so much more effectively. What I found is that nonviolent communication is a model for enriching communication that can be highly effective in solving conflicts with clients, family members, friends. It also allows us as leaders to coach, to educate people, and make them feel like we care. Because it starts because we do care. And now we're able to have so much more impact. Now, the basic outline of the nonviolent communication is very simple. And I'm just going to go through this here. And now it's in the book, so I want you to understand that. But what you're going to do is you're going to say something, when I see that, when I see you do this, I feel. So here's what I see. I feel this way. When I see you come home late, I feel frustrated because my need for respect is not met, for my need for your safety is not met, whatever it is. And now, ask for a specific activity. Would you be willing to be home on time or to call me if you're going to be more than 5 minutes late? And now, look for a way to get both of your needs met. Keep in mind that that's just a basic model. And it goes down to the intent. It's that, do I see you as a person? And can you sense that I'm seeing you as a person? Now, I have found that those 4 components have helped me keep in touch with seeing people as people. And together, these 2 books work incredibly well at truly making a difference in giving us an insight into how we can be more effective. What I found is that it comes down to our way of being and looking at the world. Now, there are some things in this world we cannot control, like who our parents are, where we are born, the things that go on around us, what other people do. What we always have a choice over is our philosophy, how we choose to live, whether we choose to see people as people or as objects. My mentor, Jim Rohn, so often said, it's not what happens that determines the quality of your life, it's what you do about what happens. And this is so important. How we respond to other people is what determines the quality of our life. It's not them, it's us. I have come to believe that the way we perceive the world and the people in it is what determines how effective we are at dealing with people and determining the quality of our connections and relationships with others that we come in contact with. When you stay focused on seeing each and every person as a person, it is truly transformative to every aspect of your life. My goal today has really been to sell you on going out and reading these books. Now, they do so much of a better job at bringing these concepts to life than I know I've done. But I know it will be very powerful for you if you do this. And if I can inspire a few of you to go out there and start looking at things from a different perspective, I know it will impact every aspect of your life in a positive way. The reality is that the quality of our life is made up by the quality of our connections with other people. Nobody is ever happy living alone. Sometimes we think, gosh, it would be easier if I didn't have any problems. No, we are social beings. We were meant to share experiences. These books will help you improve the quality of your communication, the quality of your relationships, and your ability to connect with and respond to people in every area of your life. Now, I know this has been a little bit of a different webinar than normal. I mean, normally we're talking about marketing and a variety of other things, and this is a little bit of a philosophical webinar. But I hope you found it valuable. So do me a quick favor, just give me a feedback. First of all, was this webinar valuable? Just give me a quick yes or no here. Just write on this, was it valuable? Yes, no. All right, I see the vast majority of you found it valuable. I see some of you didn't, and I apologize for that. But I hope you'll always keep coming back to these every month. Also, I want you to know, I really appreciate your feedback. If you have any specific feedback you'd like to get me, feel free to type it into the comment box. Also, send me an email at greg.herder@hobbsherder.com, or go to my Facebook page and make a post there. I'd love for you to subscribe to me on Facebook. I have 5,000 friends, so I can't accept any more friend requests, but if you go to my personal Facebook page, facebook.com/Greg Herder, you can subscribe to it. You'll see all my posts, the things that are happening, and we can interact that way. Also, I would really like to know if you buy these books. Do me a favor, if you buy one, order them. Now, here's a link so you can order them very quickly. I just want to make this easy. I think these are on Amazon, so just, go buy them. Now, do me a favor. Let me know you bought them, but now, as you're reading them, email me your insights. Go to my Facebook page, and I would really like to know how this is affecting you, what impact it's having on you over time. I'm always interested in knowing what the results are as people start to use the ideas and concepts I talk about, so please let me know. I noticed that we have gone through our time today, so I want you to know, if you have any questions, type them into your box. I may not be able to get to them instantly, but I will answer each and every one of them as soon as I possibly can, and I hope you'll plan on being at our call next month. You can get the up-to-date calls at hhcalls.com or on our website, hobbsherder.com, and make sure you sign up and be committed to being here every month, and I promise I will try and bring you ideas and information that will help you grow personally and professionally. So thank you very much. God bless you for being here, and we'll see you next time.